Hello fans of classic heavy rock bands, this is Music is a Journey. I'm Peter, and this video is part 2 in a series I'm doing where I am revisiting the recent releases of old bands that I have in my collection and whose discography I have either complete or nearly complete. That's the studio discography. In the first video in this series, I went back and checked out the 3 most recent albums by Judas Priest, that being Redeemer of Souls, as well as the Five Souls EP that came out around the same time, Firepower, and Invincible Shield. And it was really a rewarding experience to go back and revisit those albums. The reason why I did it, and the reason why I'm doing this series, is because when I get new albums of some of my old favorite bands, I tend to listen to the albums once or twice, think, oh yeah, they sound really good, and then I move along and kind of leave them. So I thought it would be a good idea to go back and listen to them a few times to reacquaint myself with them, or to better acquaint myself with them. I actually did this earlier this year, checking out, revisiting all of Opeth's albums, the entire studio discography. And the plan was to listen to each album 3 times before I made my videos. And that really allowed me to appreciate some of the albums that I didn't really have such warm feelings about. Some of the albums I almost kind of, just passed off, I got to really liking. So yeah, this is the second video in that series, and I'm going to revisit the recent studio releases of Deep Purple. Now, when I say recent, I'm going from around 2010 to the present year, 2025. The reason for that is that these old bands in the last 15 years, most of them have released 3, maybe 4 albums. And that is after some kind of a gap or some kind of a doubt in their recording, future recording plans from maybe more than 15 years ago. So yeah, Deep Purple, what we're going to be looking at, I'm not considering the Turning to Crime covers album they did about 3 years ago. We're going to take a look at Now What, Infinite. Oh, sorry, that was a single. Whoosh, and Equals 1. So before we get into it, a few things to say. First of all, I got interested in Deep Purple way back in 1984, and it was actually a few months before the Perfect Strangers album came out. And at the time, I didn't know that Deep Purple were getting back together. The Mark II lineup was working on new material. I had no idea. I bought In Rock and Machine Head. I loved those albums. And back in 1984, there were not a lot of Deep Purple albums available on a cassette. Aside from those 2, there was the Concerto for Group and Orchestra with the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra, and there were some compilations. 24 Karat Purple, When We Rock, We Rock, and When We Roll, We Roll, and then the very best of Deep Purple, Deepest Purple. That was about it. However, shortly after that, the first 3 albums were released on cassette, and the first 2, Shades of Deep Purple and Book of Taliesin, were actually taken from vinyl. So as I listened to these albums on cassette, I could hear all the pops and scratches that came along with it. At that time, I also got this book, Deep Purple, The Illustrated Biography by Chris Charlesworth. Still have it, of course. It covers the history of the band, as well as what the different members were doing before joining Deep Purple, as well as a little bit about what they did after. This book ends with talk about the possibility of a Mark II lineup, but at the time, it just didn't really seem like it was going to happen soon. So this book is probably from sometime around 1982 or so, I guess. I'd like to mention at this point here, by the way, the other night I watched a video on the Rock Daydream Nation channel. It was a video with an interview with a fellow named Steve McLean, who has written a book about the time that Rod Evans was in a bogus Deep Purple. This happened around 1980. It looks like someone decided to try to put together a bogus Deep Purple act, and knew Rod Evans and asked him to be in it because he was at least someone who used to be in Deep Purple. Anyway, that video that on Rock Daydream Nation, that interview with Steve McLean, I enjoyed it so much. It was so fascinating for me. It talks about as much as Steve McLean could find out, like what possibly happened to have the whole thing rolling. What was the reaction of Deep Purple's management? What happened legally? How did the concerts go down? What were the fans' reactions? What were the positive outcomes and the negative ones? And the story just covered so much detail. And the best part about it was this show they did in Mexico for 67,000 people. That story in itself was just incredible. Such a fascinating rock and roll story. So I want to put the link to that Rock Daydream Nation video down below here in the description for this video. So I highly recommend checking it out. It is almost an hour long, so you got to devote a bit of time, but man, what a fascinating story. And you can also check out Steve McLean's book too if you're interested. Okay, so moving along here, yeah, I got into Deep Purple in 1984. I think I followed along up until House of Blue Light and a little bit after that. And then I remember Slaves and Masters coming out, and it was like Ian Gillan's not in the band, and he was one of my favorite singers at the time, so I didn't even bother with the album. And later on, you know, Richie Blackmore wasn't in the band, and then John Lord wasn't in the band. It's like, whatever. But around 2006, I remember I came back to Japan. I went into a local CD shop, and there was Rapture of the Deep, and the cover caught my attention. So I decided, you know, I'm going to buy it and see what Deep Purple sounds like now. And it was all right. It got me interested in picking up other albums. And at that time, I ended up getting the entire studio discography up to Rapture of the Deep on CD. That meant rebuying some albums I already had on CD. And then after that, I just explored what anybody who had been in Deep Purple had done outside of Deep Purple. So that was really quite an adventure. And then, you know, finally, Now What came out. So another preface to this here, I remember reading around 2007, 2008, maybe 2009, an interview with one of the members, and he said that the cost of making an album was much higher than what they could expect to reap back in sales, particularly since at that point, actually a lot of the old bands were really hesitant to record and release albums because with the way things were going with the internet, people were file sharing, people were just getting albums for free, and you know, some of the old bands, they thought, what's the point? So anyway, it looked like maybe Deep Purple were not going to record a new album because some members thought it wasn't worth it. But then I read an interview with Roger Glover, and he said he felt it was very important for a band to record an album every once in a while as a kind of snapshot of where they are at that time. And in fact, he released a solo album called Roger Glover and the Guilty Party, and the album's title was Snapshot around that time. So anyway, it looks like around 2011 or so, it was announced that Deep Purple were recording new material. What is it, a Mark 7 lineup, or is it Mark 8? It depends if you count the time Joe Satriani was in the band or not. I usually don't because he didn't record anything with them or write anything with them. So we're talking Ian Gillan on vocals, Steve Morse guitar, Don Airey keyboards, Roger Glover bass, and Ian Pace on drums. And yeah, 2012, while they're working on the album, John Lord passes away, and inside here there is a little thing here. It says this album is dedicated to John Lord. Souls having touched are forever entwined. And this is a line from a song called Above and Beyond, which I think might also be written for John Lord, or certainly had him in mind in the lyrics. So yeah, well, there's a picture of the band, and I got one with the bonus DVD. And here's the little booklet with the lyrics and stuff in there. I really loved this album when I got it. To be honest, I never really liked the sound of Rapture of the Deep. I don't like the guitar tone. I don't like the mix. And any of the songs that have very deep, meaningful lyrics also have this like distant, whispered, scratchy echo effect. Like whatever Ian Gillan is about to sing or he has just sung is like in the background there, like this scratchy whispering sound. I really find that annoying. And so I don't enjoy Rapture of the Deep very much. I listened to it again recently because I saw that it has been remixed and it's going to be available here in Japan in a couple of weeks. So I thought, is it worth it? Because it's very expensive. Is it worth it for me to buy the album again with an improved mix? What if the improvement is not the things I don't like about it? I don't know. Anyway, back to Now What. I really like the sound of this album, and what impressed me the most, okay, I have to give you another backstory here. The band approached Bob Ezrin and asked him to produce the album. Bob Ezrin liked to produce younger, newer bands, and so he was hesitant at first to accept. However, he watched the band perform live in Toronto and he thought, okay, I want to work with these guys. And he told them, this is what we're going to do. We're not going to try to get a top 20 album or top 20 hit. What you guys want to do is give an album your fans are going to love listening to. And when you perform live, you guys do the instrumental parts really well. So we want to make sure there's lots of instrumental parts and solos on this album. And I feel this album has so much of that. You could put certainly some of the tracks into a progressive rock category, which is one of the things Deep Purple always had going for them. They were a hard rock band, actually quite heavy too, because you have your Black Sabbath heavy, but Deep Purple also had a different kind of heavy. And that comes through not only on this album, but all the albums we're going to talk about here. So yeah, we've got that telltale signature Deep Purple heavy Hammond organ and distorted guitar riff sound going on. We've got the wonderful solos of Steve Morse, as well as the incredible keyboard solos of Don Airey. I love that Don Airey has a mix of keyboard sounds. We've got Hammond organ, we've got Moog synthesizer, we've got Wurlitzer piano, we've got real piano. Loads of good stuff on here. And yeah, again, when I read the Wikipedia article about this, it cited some reviews, and just about every review that was mentioned on the Wikipedia site mentioned the word progressive. This is quite a progressive album. So, simple song. Right off the bat, we have a nice, really nice, pleasant, gentle, almost somber type of introduction, and then we get, the full Deep Purple effect. The second track, Weirdistan, is kind of a weird one. It's where, let's say Deep Purple have two approaches to their style. One is the rock and roll Deep Purple. It's the bluesy riffs, it's the rock riffs, it's the rock song. Hard rock, heavy hard rock, whatever. And then the other side is this classically inspired side, because both Steve Morse and Don Airey can do so much with their instruments. They can play so many different styles. And so this is the style where there's that classically influenced compositional style, let's call it progressive. And that shows up on Weirdistan, the second track. And I love Don Airey's keyboard solo because it exactly enforces this idea of weirdness. There's one part where the notes just kind of tinkle away and peter out uncomfortably. Like, it's such a perfect effect for a song with weird in the title. Other great tracks on here. Hell to Pay is basically a rockin' track with a story about a guy who used to be a rebel and he wants to have a revolution to bring things back to the way they were. But the instrumental part really lets the band go. And after Steve Morse does a fantastic solo, it goes down to just Ian Pace on the bass drum, Roger Glover playing on the bass guitar, and then Don Airey comes in with a Hammond organ solo. And that part with just those three musicians together takes me right back to Mark I Deep Purple. I'm thinking Mandrake Root, Bird Has Flown, something like that. It really has that. And I don't know if that was just the way things went or if there was this tribute to John Lord in there somewhere, but I'm really reminded of Mark I Deep Purple when I hear that part. Other songs on here, Bodyline is probably the one song on the album that is really just a straight up Deep Purple rock song, nothing fancy, except Ian Pace's drum intro has a kind of an interesting rhythm to it. Above and Beyond, I think that's the one where they're thinking of John Lord and that. And it has this rising, again, classically influenced kind of feel to the way things build up. They're very good at doing songs like that. Blood from a Stone, I remember reading reviews of this album when it came out. People either did not mention this song or they said it was a low point on the album. I love it. First of all, I think it's time to mention Ian Gillan's vocals. Yes, he's getting older. Yes, on Rapture of the Deep, whenever he had to do a scream, it was always the same scream every time. For Now What, Ian has, I think, kept his vocals more moderate. He's keeping them in a range that is comfortable for him to sing. And that's bringing things back down to the lower end a little bit, maybe lower than what he's used to singing before. He still gets a high note in there, here and there, and I think he's not forcing himself, so it doesn't sound really uncomfortable. Maybe live, it might sometimes, but I think he does a pretty darn good performance on this album, as does everyone. Everybody sounds great. But Blood from a Stone, we have Don Airey on a Wurlitzer piano, Steve Howe playing very soft and smooth. His solo has a bluesy feel to it, almost like a Stevie Ray Vaughan sound, I think. And Don Airey does this fantastic solo on the Wurlitzer piano, which reminds me almost of something from Riders of the Storm by the Doors. It's a very laid back track with Ian singing in lower register, but then the chorus, things really power up and get heavy, and Steve Morse is letting notes come off his fretboard that sounds exactly like he's ripping flesh from the bone almost, or sucking blood from a stone. So I really love that track, and I say now it's still my favorite track from this album, in spite of the fact that I found many more tracks that were really good to hear again. I also want to mention Après-Vous. Again, that is another just fun rock song, but with this extended instrumental thing where they kind of go off somewhere and deliver an interesting instrumental performance. This one being a little bit more atmospheric with some strange keyboard effects, and Steve Morse doing some very atmospheric type things with the guitar. I really love that they did that on this album. And I guess, yeah, All the Time in the World is another slower track. I've always liked that one too, about not rushing through life, not speeding to get ahead and grab everything. Just take it slow, take it easy. And there's a beautiful guitar solo by Steve Morse on that one. And then finally, Vincent Price. Really weird, heavy riff. These slide guitar effects with an eerie sound to them. Don Airey gives us a keyboard intro that reminds us that he is the guy who composed the intro to Mr. Crowley by Ozzy Osbourne. A really cool song, and it closes up with Ian giving us an Ian Gillan scream for, how old is he now? 60 something at this point in time. This CD also came with a bonus track, It'll Be Me, and then of course the DVD, but we're not going to worry about that one too much. So I'm going to say right now also that this is probably in my top 6, if not 6, then 7 Deep Purple albums. I really like this album, and for this video, I wanted to listen to it at least 3 times through. I think I've listened to it 3 times through. I also listened to most of the tracks a 4th and 5th and maybe even 6th time through. So that was a lot of talking about that one. Let's move on to Deep Purple's Infinite now. By the way, Now What? It was their 19th album. It came out on the 26th of April, 2013, and it is 57 minutes and 6 seconds long. I wanted to mention that at the beginning. So let's see here. We're going on to Infinite, and this one, the 20th album, came out on April 7th, 2017. This album to me sounds a little bit more angry. We've actually got profanity in a few of the songs here. One song, Hip Boots, it's about basically being able to wade around and all the effluence around. You got your hip boots on, so you're not going to get dirty. And the opening line is, well, you can bury me up to my knees in shit. There's also a line in here that one of the songs that says, I don't give a fucking damn. I don't know how you get to piss me off so much. There's another shit in another song somewhere. I don't know. Did this album come with the parental advisory sticker in the United States, I wonder? Or maybe not, because the kids weren't buying it. It was actually the parents who were buying it, wasn't it? So maybe it was grandparents' parental sticker warning, whatever. Yeah, so it's more of an angrier album. Also, there's a little bit more of the rock side on here. You know, Hip Boots is one Night in Vegas, Johnny's Band. I actually really like Johnny's Band. It's a song about some guys who form a band, they tour the clubs and dance halls, whatever, they get a single in the charts, they become a big success, then the band starts falling apart, and it ends up with two of the original members playing in just like small clubs here and there, but people enjoying hearing those songs that were once big and made everybody feel so good. There's also one here, On Top of the World. It's one of Ian Gillan's, I don't know if he's recounting a moment in his life or just living out a fantasy, having a party on a rooftop, getting all naked with all these women, but finding out the next morning that the goddess that was looking after him during the night is not quite what she was the night before, and then he ends up excusing himself and stepping off the rooftop by mistake. Fun song that is. So yeah, we've got a few of these more just fun rockers. The lyrics are usually telling a story, kind of entertaining, but we also still have the progressive side, and I actually forgot about that. I thought this was just a good album, but not as good as Now What. But now I find Time for Bedlam, the opening track. It sounds like this is going to be a concept album, a society like a 1984 type of society where you have to do what the government tells you. You have to be politically correct. I mean, like following everything that they want you to do. Be a good little political slave. And then the main character here has been found politically insane and is put off in a cold, damp cell with nothing but wet straw to lie on, sleep on for the rest of his life. Yeah, and it feels like we're starting out a concept album almost with that story, but it doesn't go that way. All I Got Is You, this is a relationship with loads of friction. The woman is constantly showing how upset she is with her man, and, he's fighting back kind of in here. Lyrically, it is an interesting song, but it has a really nice, again, this classically inspired compositional type beginning, and the instrumental section, again, we're getting some great solos by Don Airey and Steve Morse on here. Get Me Out of Here, that is actually a fun one about, anyway, basically had enough, want to pack it in, and again, it's got a bit of an angry side to it. You say, pull yourself together, get a grip. You can stick it up your jacksie because I'm jumping ship. There are many moments in this album where I feel like Ian Gillan is getting some frustration off his chest. The Surprising is really a surprising song. This is really a modern day prog rock band song. Deep Purple really stretch out on here, show their compositional abilities, do change ups in the music, go off into a different, more gentle soundscape, bring it around again. It's such a fantastic song, and I never noticed it before, but every time I listen to it, I feel I'm getting more and more pulled into this incredible music that they're making. And it's really impressive because, you can say Deep Purple were at their best there in the early 70s, the original Mark II lineup. And yeah, I think Burn is a great album as well. Come Taste the Band is one I've come to appreciate more recently, in recent years. Perfect Strangers is such a fantastic reunion album. But if you think of all that as being like way in the past, and what is the band doing now? Yes, they're putting out a new album every few years, but man, they're really exercising their musical capabilities, I think. I could sit listening to these 4 albums as I did for a week and a bit and just really immerse myself in it and enjoy it. On Top of the World, I said Birds of Prey is the track number 9, which again having a little bit more of that heavy prog side to it, a very nice, dramatic Steve Morse solo ending to the song, and then Roadhouse Blues, cover of The Doors. I'm not really sure why they chose to put that in for track 10, but anyway, I guess I'll show you the inside here too. We've got a little booklet is in there, and then we've got, again, this is the album proper, and then I've got an EP type thing here with 4 tracks that includes some extra songs on there. So that is Infinite, sorry. And yeah, as I said, I've come to appreciate it more. There's just one thing I don't like about it so much. With Now What, I felt the Hammond organs and the keyboards are very solidly in the right channel and arching up over the top. And Steve Morse's guitar was very solidly in the left channel and arching up over top. And at times, both lead instruments could fill all the spaces. I'm listening to this with, in-ear earphones. So I have this kind of visual of how I'm hearing the sounds. But with Infinite, Steve Morse's guitar is shrunk back a little bit. Sometimes I hear it moving along the bottom towards the middle, but it's just not arching over the top as much as Don Airey's keyboards still are. So on August 7th, 2020, Deep Purple released their 21st album called Whoosh. It is 51 minutes and 29 seconds. And actually, I failed to mention it, but Infinite was a little bit shorter than the other ones. So this is the third round here now for this lineup working together with Bob Ezrin. When I first got this, there was only one song that really stood out for me at first, which any of you who love this album, you're going to go, what? Why? Yeah, so it's divided into Act 1 and Act 2, in case you don't know. And when I listened to it, the first track, Throw My Bones, great rockin' tune. And then we go on to Drop the Weapon and We're All the Same in the Dark, which were rockin' tunes as well, but not as good. And I just felt like, okay, Deep Purple have kind of left the progressive side and they're just doing a rock album now. But then it was track 4, Nothing at All, where again, we've got this classically inspired type of compositional thing with Steve Morse's guitar and Don Airey's keyboards doing a similar thing, but taking turns playing that. The verses are a little more calm and easy going, but the lyrics are really important because it's telling us, it's warning us. Mother Nature is more or less going to give us a smug smile and say, well, anyway, it's time for you all to go. And there's a line in the song like that, like, the old lady smiled and then she blew all the leaves off my trees, which I think is the way of saying Mother Nature is going to say, yes, you've been around long enough, you've made a mess, now get out. There's also a line about and the trash that sails the 7 seas comes very nearly up to my knees. So this is a song warning about the way we're going with stuff here. Listening to this again, still same conclusion up to track 4, but after that, the next track is No Need to Shout. And it's a fun rockin' song, but I liked it a lot more this time around, especially just the lyrics. It's about someone who will not shut up, someone who keeps talking, kind of like what I do in my videos here. And then we got to Step by Step, which is the last track of Act 1. And this one is a really unusual song for Deep Purple. It almost makes me think that this could be in a Halloween musical. We have these background vocals doing this ooh, ooh, and it has this slow kind of swaying, eerie feel to it. Don Airey's keyboard solo could almost sound like skeleton fingers in the wind, you know, playing over the keys. It's such an interesting effect and very unusual for Deep Purple. Now, Act 2, we start off with What the What? Another fun rockin' tune, piano solo, people dancing, having a good time, amusing lyrics, you know, whimsical lyrics. But then we are on to The Long Way Round, which starts off sounding like another usual type of Deep Purple song. But again, this one expands out, gives us more stuff happening in the music with the solos, and then we go into kind of more eased back part, and then we wrap up with a really beautiful instrumental where at some point I almost feel Steve Morse's guitar sounds more like a clarinet or alto sax in a few of the notes. And it's a very beautiful wrap up to the song. And then the final chords, the shadow comes over everything as everything slows down and the tone drops. And then we go on to Power of the Moon, which has this kind of mid-range suspense horror film type of sound to it almost. And again, this is a very different style of song from what we're used to hearing with Deep Purple. We move on to an instrumental called Remission Possible, which starts with some pretty heavy Hammond organ and some great guitar solo from Steve Morse. This sounds like it could have been a track from Don Airey's Light in the Sky album from around 2008 or so. Very cool. And then we go on to Man Alive, which again, it's like Deep Purple are doing something different. We have these songs that have the typical telltale heavy Deep Purple rock sound with the Hammond organ and the guitars, but there are other things they're putting in these songs that are just very different. Again, I think Ian Gillan's performance is fine. I had this impression that his vocals were going downhill and he just wasn't doing so well, but I think he's doing what he can do, and he's doing it well on these last 3 albums for sure here. Then finally we wrap up with a cover of, or a re-recording of And the Address, which was of course the opening track on their debut album. And almost like to tie it together, the font of the debut album and Whoosh of the band's name is the same. So there's almost a feeling like, so is that it? Is this the last Deep Purple album? And I think somebody asked Roger Glover that, and he said, I thought our last album was our last album. So anyway, Whoosh, an album which I have come to appreciate a lot more. But there's one thing again, Steve Morse's guitar has become even quieter. It's almost like he's shoved into a cabinet now. Even some of the songs that open with a guitar riff, it just sounds muted and quiet, and the guitar has lost its edge, its bite. And I don't know why that is. It's just, it feels unbalanced. Don Airey's keyboards are still full and rich. The guys in the middle, the vocals, the drums, the bass, it's all still there, but Steve Morse is shrinking. Oh, please don't take my Stevie away. Well, anyway, a year after this, they would record their Turning to Crime covers album, suggested by Bob Ezrin. Hey, let's just do a fun album together. And then, due to the health condition of Steve Morse's wife, he had to leave the band. He took his leave from the band anyway. As I understand it, he left during the tour because of his wife's health condition. And so they brought in this guy from Ireland, Simon McBride, on guitars. Much, much younger. I mean, he's basically young enough to be their son. He's in his 40s. The rest of the band is all in their late 70s. In fact, Ian Gillan just turned 80 this past August here. August 19th, 2025, Ian Gillan turned 80. Roger Glover is 79, Don Airey and Ian Pace are 77, and then we've got Simon McBride, who was born in 1979. Anyway, they then go ahead and make a new album, July 19th, 2004, their 23rd album after Turning to Crime, 52 minutes and 6 seconds long. This, we've got some changes right off the bat. First of all, the guitar has now moved to the right channel, keyboards to the left, and Simon McBride's guitar sounds like a freaking rock guitar. I mean, it has power, it fills up its channel, it's there with Don Airey's keyboards, you know, two powerful beasts facing off, and you know, the sound is coming over and they're filling the space. It's almost like this album is loud. You'd almost think Bob Ezrin did not produce this album because it sounds so different. So we've got a snarling guitar in here, a snarling rock guitar. Simon McBride pulls off some great solos, and he just fits right in. Of course, his style is different from Steve Morse, and of course is different from Ritchie Blackmore and even Tommy Bolin, but it fits, it works. The thing is that about this album is it is pretty much a hard rock album almost all the way through. We have to say something about, first of all, actually the song that I first heard from this was Portable Door with a video. And I remember watching that just thinking, man, the whole band is on fire. Even Gillan sounds like he's got more energy than he had on the last 3 albums. And as I said, I thought he was doing pretty well on the last 3 albums. He's still actually in one track on here. He goes into his more kind of harsher vocals. And of course, it's not like it was in the old days. This is no bloodsucker here. But it sounds like he's being pulled under a Sherman tank. That's my image. He's just like, and it sounds like, okay, it probably doesn't sound good, but that he is, you know, in his late 70s and he's got the feeling, he's got the energy to do it. It somehow just works, I guess, because we know it's Ian Gillan. Anyway, If I Were You, that is a kind of a hard rock ballad with that, you know, the bar chords, the da-da-dun, 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 kind of a chorus there. I think this is the track out of all these albums where Ian Gillan's voice sounds its weakest, but it's all right. Pictures of You is a melodic hard rock track. Reminds me a little bit of Call of the Wild from the House of Blue Light. That kind of melodic rock feeling to it. I'm saying nothing. I've got here written down that it is a heavy rocker with a cool keyboard solo by Don Airey, and as well Simon McBride sounding great. Now you're talking. This is a very energetic song. This is the one where Ian goes crazy on the vocals. Great energy, not like the old days, but he's going for it. But also this has become one of my favorites because the band exercise their musicality a little bit more in the instrumental section. It's not just a hard rock song with a guitar solo and a keyboard solo. There's a little bit more work going on here, which is really what I've got used to hearing on these last 3 albums, and I'm not hearing so much on this one. I'll Catch You is a song that sounds like they said, hey, you know, when a blind man cries, why don't we try to write a song that's kind of like that one? And it does feel like that, yes. But again, Simon McBride, excellent solo. And then finally, the last track, Bleeding Obvious. This is what I was waiting for. We finally get a track that sounds like a heavy prog band is writing it. Solid hard rock album all the way through to the last track, and then we get the heavy prog band that, you know, I was actually really enjoying finding out, discovering, and listening to over and over again. There are several tracks on these last 3 albums I played probably 6 or 7 times even, because I really liked that heavy prog side that Deep Purple can do. So we get it on the final track here. So that what do I think? Yeah, it was really fun. As I said, it was a week, and after the week was done, I actually recorded this video twice before already. One was way too long, probably this one is too, but this is the one that's going up. And another one was just really a mess because I tried to make it short and it failed miserably. I just kept jumping, oh, I forgot this, I forgot that. Anyway, yeah, it was a real joy listening to these 4 albums, and I really liked just immersing myself and finding these songs that have all this extra goodness to it and just listening to them over and over again until I was waking up in the morning within my head, or they were playing in my head throughout the day, and I couldn't wait to hear them again during my commute. So that's it, folks. I think I've rambled on enough, but I am really excited about those 4 albums. Now, a week has passed, just about 6 days have passed, and I've been kind of musically all over the place before starting on my next revisiting the albums video. So that'll be my project for this coming week. That's it. Thank you so much for watching, and please do let me know, what do you think about these last 4 Deep Purple albums? Do you have a favorite? Do you like them? Are there some songs you think are really surprisingly brilliant? Or do you think the band is just treading water and, you know, kicking out a new album every few years, and do we really need to hear any more? Let me know your feelings. Okay, see you in the next video, everyone. Take care. Bye.